Hey everybody, welcome back to Danger Planet. This is Doug. I'm here with a couple of special guests, and today we're going to cover the 2024 Malifaux World Series Championships, featuring Pope-Darpa and Michael from Pack Mentality. All right, guys, welcome back to this episode, I guess. Landon, how are you? You doing good?
Doing great. How about you?
Pretty good. Pretty excited. Brandon, how you doing, buddy?
I am fully sinusly infected from Pac-Man Plugged. Love it.
Super
Got it. Every time I go to
gross.
Philadelphia, I get a sinus infection. Huge fan.
Super gross.
Yeah.
Well,
fine.
glad you guys are here. Now we have the most special guest, Michael from Pack Mentality, and also of Malifaux World Series MWS fame, is here specifically. So everybody say hello. Michael, welcome to the Danger Planet. How are you?
Hello.
Howdy, gentlemen. Great to be with you guys. I'm fueled up on fried chicken and ready to talk shop, so thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're excited. It's honestly a kind of a crime that we haven't had you guys on here before. I listen to Pack Mentality a lot, and I always use it as like a gauge for what's happening outside of our meta in a very competitive like nature. And so I tune in very closely and listen to you guys a lot. We should have had you on years ago, I guess. But, no time like the present. I guess for those uninitiated, or for those that might not be familiar with Pack Mentality, Michael, can you give us just, before we get into like the MWS stuff, can you just give us a quick introduction on like who you are, what Pack Mentality is all about, and also a little bit of context on kind of the different members from the pod team and what you guys are up to and what you guys do?
100%, and echo what you'd said earlier. Great to collab with you guys, and would like to do more of this in the future as well. Big fan of today's content too, so on the same page there. So Pack Mentality, we're a very small podcast of 3 members based here in Auckland, New Zealand, down in the far corner of the globe. We like to play quite competitive, the 3 of us being myself, Michael, also known as Grizzled Grogdog on the online scene, Brendan, who is Gubbins, and Hamdog, who is Hamish. And we like to play quite competitively. New Zealand is relatively small. We're a bit of a shark meta, so lots of good players here, but not a lot of players in general. And so we find ourselves naturally at home in the online scene. And starting the podcast, which has been going now, I want to say, just over a year. It was kind of a passion project to share a little bit back with some of our friends and the wider scene. Beard Minis is one of the guys who got us into it originally, and he does some content of his own based over in Australia, so it was great to link up with him, get a few pointers on how to do this. And
Beard's a good dude, and his channel is really cool. I'll link that as well. He also does a lot of streamed games.
Mm-hmm.
You can often find him playing against Pete from Rage Quit Wire. He's a good dude. I like Beard a lot.
He's awesome.
You should check his stuff out as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his series of Malifaux where he cuts down the think time. One of the issues with Vassal, for all its wonderful values, is that it can be a little bit of silence when you're waiting for decisions. So he does a really cool series where he edits down the time between that. So it's like a 40-minute consumable video to watch a game, which is, I find, really good because I'm often time-starved. But yeah, so we started in
less of a commitment to sit down and watch a 3-hour Vassal recording.
Exactly. You either are putting on 1.5 times speed for those, or you use Beard's format to make it a bit more palatable. So yes.
And what about yourself personally? Like, how did you get into wargaming? Did you start with Malifaux? Did you, graduate elementary school, immediately decide in middle school that you're going to become a Malifaux expert? Did you? Well, how did you end up here in your hobby journey and your wargaming journey?
In intermediate and then into early high school here in New Zealand, I found Warhammer 40,000, as so many of us do, tinkered with various awfully painted models and factions and things like that. Usually more attracted to the evil kinds of factions, so played Chaos Space Marines and Dark Eldar and things like that. Had a lot of fun with it, but I didn't take it particularly seriously. And then one day I stumbled upon Malifaux, which was recommended to me, and after getting involved in it and picking it up and seeing how it plays out on the table, I have struggled to take other games seriously. I just find that Malifaux scratches so many itches for me on a competitive level and sort of like a cerebral thinking about the game kind of level that it's as deep as you want it to be, and I find that super duper rewarding. So now it's the main thing I play in terms of hobby and tabletop. 100%.
I think the biggest thing that I always say, I agree with you for sure. I think the biggest thing that I always think is the unparalleled level of agency that the game system affords to the pilots. Like, surely sometimes a red joker happens and a black joker happens and it sucks and you bitch about it to your friends or whatever and you're salty. But there's an unparalleled level of agency, at least I've found, because I've been playing war games just like you for like the last 25 years, 20 years of my life. And Malifaux is truly the one system where, and Landon was teaching me this when I was like trying to learn competitive. Landon was the one that told me, he was like, if you ever find that you've lost a game of Malifaux because of a specific card flip or a specific interaction, most likely it was a series of decisions that you made that led yourself to that point, which put you in that situation to lose that flip. Like, most likely you had some agency at some point to not be in that spot at that time. And it because of the cheating hand mechanic and the alternating activations, like I haven't found anything like it. And I've, for the last 3.5 years that I've been jamming this game, like super hardcore. So,
well, I think we have a really important question that we haven't broached yet, that the internet is dying to know, from Michael. you know what I'm talking about, yeah. How do you feel about Haley Sproul taking New Zealand Taskmaster Season 5? And do you think Ben Hurley was robbed? I think that's the most important question.
Are we implying that I do anything other than games?
Oh, I was. I had
so my flatmates are avid enjoyers of Taskmaster.
We had oh my god, I can't name right now. We had Gubbins on, and we were chatting about it. So
the chicks, yeah.
All right, well.
What are you guys talking about?
Taskmaster is the best show that exists, and then New Zealand has a series that they run that has. It's amazing. It's really good. I'll show you next time I'm over.
It is pretty soul crushing that Ben lost. I will say that.
Yeah, I was sad. We like just got the episode, so I watched it like a week ago. So it's fine. We'll see who's on in season 6. All right. Well, back to Malifaux, I guess.
Okay. So the reason that we have the brain trust of Michael and Landon on the show today is to give an overview of the Malifaux World Series Championships, talk a little bit about what that is for people that might not be familiar with the MWS in general, how the MW just like kind of runs, how to join it. And then on the back end, we're going to talk about the top 32, which is basically the finals of the Malifaux World Series Championship for 2024. And the two fine gentlemen you have right in front of you digitally, Mr. Landon, the Pope, and Mr. Michael, the dog internet content. I'm just gonna say Michael from Pack Mentality. These two gentlemen were in the finals, and Michael won, and Pope got runner-up, and we're going to talk about that. So, I guess the first place to start at, I kind of want to start at a little bit of the beginning for folks that are more used to playing in-person Malifaux, or they're more used to going to in-person events and they haven't tried out online. Can you two guys give me a little bit of context? What is the MWS? How does it work for people that want to become a part of it or want to join it? And how do you go about getting matches and games? And how does all of that kind of lead up to what we're going to talk about next, which is the finals? Like, how do you qualify for that? How do you become part of the top 32 at the end of the year there? I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know that process or that story at all. So I'd love you guys to enlighten us.
Yeah, by all means. I wonder if I can speak to it on a high level of, from a committee sort of perspective, what it's about, and then Landon might elucidate us on what it's like to participate in those events and what value they bring. So the Malifaux World Series, as we've dubbed ourselves, we are a group of folk who really, really love this game and want it to be a global reaching game. And so we've created a, I guess, community in which people can find other like-minded players. We tend to be more on the competitive side as a collective than most metas, but there's definitely space for some shits and gigs and some shenanigans and some casual games as well. So we operate two sort of looking for games channels, and these games themselves are run on the Vassal engine. We try to have that updated quarterly with new assets and new maps, things like that, to keep things nice and fresh. And we run the Malifaux World Series events schedule, which is about 6 or so official events that we run every year. Maybe it's more like 6 to 8, depends. They tend to be 3 to 4 to 5 rounds as these events. And the way that we've formatted these is that every week you schedule in one of your games against your opponent. They could be from anywhere around the world if they've signed up for it. We obviously release the player packs well in advance. You play your designated game and you're accruing points based on Longshanks. And we also keep our own points tracker here in the Malifaux World Series, culminating in, towards the end of the year, what has been this year and last, a top 32 championship, where if you've accrued enough points, you're invited along. We have also, to date, invited people who have won significant events around the world also. So if you've won a local tournament with a high player cap, we also have extended an invite to get some of the best into this online scene also. And the whole idea is just to get, as I say, the best of the best to come and compete against one another. And that's kind of what we're trying to do from like a tournament creation perspective, to get the most competitive games we can find and get those players enjoying the game that we all love, as well as a chance to bridge across metas. I wouldn't have had the awesome privilege and pleasure of, for example, playing against Landon without something like this, and so that's one of the other bits of value it adds. That's just a brief sort of synopsis of what it's trying to do from the top level, but I'd be curious to hear from Landon how it sort of interacts with playing some of the larger in-person events, because your guys' events are much bigger than we have in little old New Zealand.
Yeah, so I guess I want to start with, from my perspective, a little bit of history. Like, MWS kind of started as just a smaller server of people who just wanted to play games online with each other, that kind of eventually evolved into this, place where you could just bridge across metas and play across the pond. Like, I think the first couple of games I played against the UK were over Vassal, and so that was just a really exciting thing to get started back when the edition was first rolling out and Vassal was really new for like 3rd edition. And it's really incredible how the community's kind of grown it from that small community into what it is today. And so the number one value I get out of doing MWS is it sort of forces you to play games, because there's another human being on the line that is, counting on you to get their hobby time in every week when you sign up for a league. And you're allowed to skip out on a good number of tournaments throughout the year for just playing online, and still have a good shot at qualifying, because they only take however many of your good results and then politely ignore all of your bad results. So of the 10 tournaments they run, if you only participate in 2 or 3, or I guess 3 minimum, right, you have a pretty good shot of actually being invited if you did well when you participated. Because I think this year I only played 3 or 4 Vassal events, and that was enough. Or you could just win a major event and get invited. But like I said, the big value is that you get forced into kind of playing these games so that you get your hobby time in. Because for someone like me, my local meta is a little quieter than it used to be when I first started playing Malifaux. And this has been a way for me to really stay in contact with the game and connect with other people and stay fresh on the meta. And that in itself, I think, just has value at all levels of play. But I also do value the high level of competition I get out of it, but it's still reasonable just to get in some games, even if you're not looking for that, cutting edge, I gotta be playing the best of the best type things, because there's a reasonable skill level variance within the MWS, I'd say.
And it's also nice to be able, the biggest thing for me is, before I started playing online more, there was 3 or 4 people in my around my house and that lived near me, and I'd play them all the time, and it was fun. but I really only got exposure to like 2 or 3, or probably like 6 different crews that I learned about. And then from now 1 full year of playing online and being more online, I've played against every crew in the game at this point, like at least once. And it's just the diversity of different types of pilots, different metas run different masters different ways. You see other lists that you'd never think that you would see on, like, from your local buddies, because they wouldn't even think about running an XYZ model or whatever. And for me, that's a huge boon of participating in online, like Malifaux and the online Vassal community, for me personally, at least.
Yeah, for sure. Just to build on that, there's also the various different like chat rooms they have in the World Series hub, that Discord that everything goes on. And even if you're just lurking, it's a really good place to just absorb information about the game.
Yeah, I agree 100%. What were you gonna say, Brandon? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that the one thing more than anything else that the Vassal community really has going for it is that people who want to play games and don't have a local meta can find that really easily. It's a bit of a transition, right? Like, you got to play online, and that's a hurdle. But every time that I've been involved, and I'm really just sort of tangentially involved in Vassal, I play most of my games in person. Anybody I've ever talked to is willing to sit down and help me work stuff out and get in and going. So if you're somebody who prefers to play online, even or in person even, but like doesn't have enough games, and the alternative is to sort of let your interest in Malifaux wane, I would strongly recommend checking out all the Vassal stuff for sure.
Plus, the unspoken thing that no one's brought up yet: access to the entire game for free. Don't have to spend a dime. You have every single crew.
Well, plus or minus internet subscription costs, but
sure. The MWS. I don't know. Michael, are you guys willing to pay people's internet fees as well, or that's a no-go on that one? I assume just the Vassal upkeep.
Yeah, let us just reach into our vast summaries of cash from the treasury and just send us your bank details and we'll have you sorted.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
seems legit to me.
Hear me out. Obviously, the Malifaux World Series is just a tool for big internet to get more people to buy internet, right? So
stop this man right now. How did you find out?
Stop this man right now. No. Obviously.
No, I do actually, specifically regarding the architecture of the tournament. If we're ready to move into that sort of premise, I've always been curious about how you guys arrived into the separating like a group stage sort of runoff tournament that's like, largely speaking, double elim, I guess. But so I guess at the end of the day, right, you have 32 people. Of those 32 people in the top 32, which is made out of people who qualified and people who were invited, the rough structure, which is like me as the TO person is always interested in. So you have a 32-person tournament, and it's not single elim because you want to have more games than that. So you have basically the round of 32 is a 4-round multi-week event, or 3-round multi-week event, where you broke out into groups to sort of get the best 2 out of each group of 4. How did you guys decide who went into the groups of 4? How does that work? And kind of, can you talk about what the decision to do like a single elim 16 with a less single elim 32 is? Like a double elim 32 almost? Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, it does make sense. So
it's really interesting. I've never seen something like this before in any of the games I've run. So
yeah, so the way we reach this is as we approach the end of the year, we've sort of got our list of players and the points that they've accrued for all the events they've entered, as well as the people who have taken out first place in those major events. I think for this instance, we had 10 major events worldwide that we were looking at. Some of them were won by more than one person. So Nathan, if you're listening, hats off. Well done. I believe he may have won one of yours, actually.
Yeah. I was just playing video games with him 5 minutes before I logged into the Zencaster. I'll let him know when I talk to him later tonight.
Exactly right. So what we do at that stage is we start reaching out to everyone. We put a post out onto our Discord inviting people who have made what we dub the top 32 to let us know their interest in playing. Obviously, some people can't make it. One of our close compatriots, Brody, he was traveling at the time, so he couldn't make it. He couldn't play. So then we go to the next person down and so on and so forth. Once we have our top 32, we are then looking at their scores and their placements across the year and seeding out 4 pools, as you can see, 8 pools of 4 players each. And these are basically from the person in player 1 along the matrix's top seed, quote unquote. Then you have your second, third, and fourth seed. They all have equal chances within this micro tournament itself, but those are the seeds that they initially come from in terms of the results that they've managed to accrue so far. We made it a top 32 just to add a bit more, I guess, volume, as well as give a chance to more players to be involved in this. In previous years, we've just jumped straight into a top 16 single elimination, or basically it was that because the pools were so small, it was almost like that immediately. So I participated in the 2022 top 16 as it was, and so the last 2 years we've gone top 32 instead. We've had feedback both ways about it, but generally more games is more better, I find, and it also just gets more content out there. So we've had a bunch of games recorded, which has been great. So it also does give a chance for the players who are good but might struggle to reach that top 16 to have a chance to progress further. And some of the players did overperform when we look at, for example, Izzy. He was the fourth seed in his pool, but he managed to sneak in there alongside Andre, overcoming Radic, who's a very good player. So it does give
one of the best players in the world, probably.
Exactly right. So it gives players a chance to prove their mettle and try to reach that single elimination bracket.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the interesting part that we didn't even say is the consortium of the wolf pack, or dog pack as it were. You guys are all on the MWS committee, and you help shape the direction and formatting of kind of the life cycle of the MWS. Is that fair to say?
Yes, when we can when we can wrangle the boys to make some decision points, and we're not all busy gaming and things. But yes, there's at present there's 8 members of the committee, I believe, and the three of us.
The dog pack is almost half of them.
Yes, we're a large minority within that.
We're just one big Cerberus, you know.
One big Cerberus that makes Aussie-like decisions for the rest of the world. Sounds good to me. All right, so you guys did a great job explaining what the MWS is. You did a good job kind of giving us some context here. Now let's talk a little bit about your gentleman's personal journey. I guess, can each of you give us context for the faction you're going into it with, what your mindset was going into the top 32 rounds, right? And kind of give us the highlights on your way up to the final match, and then we'll take a break and we'll kind of specifically just talk about that final match, the finals that you guys played against each other. Landon, do you want to go first for just like, what was your mindset coming in? What faction did you declare? Why? And give us the top notes of your journey to the finals.
Yeah, so I guess just to start, because any journey starts with qualifying, I actually wasn't expecting to be invited this year, given that I had only played 3 Vassal events. So it was a big surprise to me when, later in the year I got the invite after we, kind of did the math and saw that my points actually qualified me. So that was exciting, but at that point in time I still had to figure out how to be good enough at Malifaux to, play with the big boys, as I hadn't actually won any events this year, unlike a lot of the major people who were competing, and I'd kind of been off the game for a little bit. So I started the top 32 by declaring 10 Thunders, which is kind of like my comfort mainstay faction. I don't have a ton of experience repping Asami yet, who was the new hotness at the time, but I kind of leaned back into just playing, I think, masters that were good in each of the different matchups. And so for my top 32, fortunately, I got a lot of familiar matchups, and then one I felt pretty okay experimenting with. I had in my pool Brian Bailing, who's a good friend of mine, Davos, on Discord. So he was the Outcast matchup where I experimented a little bit by dropping Asami to see just how nasty she was. I had a Dreamer versus Lynch game, which I think is an excellent matchup for Lynch, and that's out there recorded in case you're curious why, but that was a slam dunk game. And then I had the Thunder's Mirror with Ollie, who was my other opponent in pool, and that was the game where I looked at my pool and I thought, I'm probably going to lose this game, but I'm going to do a little bit of practice ahead of time to see if I can hammer out, some sort of idea of what to play. And so I had played a practice game with Drayson, the only practice game I played of the entire event, actually. That's how much I feared and respected this matchup. Of McCabe 2 into Asami. And, I felt pretty bad about that matchup after playing my practice game, but I didn't think I had a much better option into it. And then Ollie ends up taking Shenlong, so I have a Shenlong McCabe game instead, and that matchup is just awful for McCabe. So he schooled me on what that Thunder's Mirror is supposed to look like. So then going into it, I thankfully won my other 2 games, other than the Asab or the game into Ollie, and had won my seed into the top 16. But seeing all of the different Thunders players who made it out of their pools, and knowing that I had lost the 10 Thunders Mirror to one of the players who had qualified, I thought to myself, there's probably a change that needs to be made here if I'm going to make it to the top. And that's how I ended up on the decision to pivot over to Guild for my top 16 run, because the committee had not forbidden us from changing factions in between. And in addition to that, they had also allowed us to see who our round 1 opponent would be in the new tournament. So I knew I was going to be playing into Simon or Drayson, who I'd actually already practiced the Thunder's Mirrors with. And like I said, that practice game didn't give me warm fuzzies. So I said, you know what? Guild has the tech that they need to beat Asami. If I'm expecting that I'm going to have to play into Asami, I'm going to play Guild. And so my first round was against Drayson.
For the folks at home, also afraid of the Asami menace, could you enlighten us quickly for what that tech is? Just very high level.
Sure. So there's this upgrade called No Prisoners. You can put it on your 2 scariest models, and they ignore now hazardous terrain, which is the biggest threat coming out of Asami, because you'll see it in both versions. Then you have a couple of different options for trying to deal with summons. I didn't end up going the route where you take Lone Marshal, but you could if you were so inclined. In the pool I particularly had, it was a wedge pool. So I just decided I was going to take as many big killy armor boys as I could, because that's the kind of thing that Asami can struggle into. And it was, a close enough sort of, broom closet of a map that everything was going to be grouped up for when the Pale Rider used his, bonus action. So those 2 things are things that Asami hates, either incarnation.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Thank you for taking a pause. Proceed.
Yeah, so that game ends up going a lot better for me now that I'm playing Guild into Simon, as we just both fought it out in the center of this broom closet, and Guild's really good at those types of engagements. My next game I end up playing into Izzy, who we mentioned earlier, who... Was he on Thunders for the top 32, or did he switch for top 16?
It's an excellent question, to which I do not know.
Also a Neverborn player.
Izzy was on Thunders for the top 16.
Okay, he was on Thunders for top... Well, yeah, for top 16, we know. I was just wondering if he had also switched for top 32 into 16. But
it doesn't say in the player packet on the group list, and I don't think there was a Longshanks. Or was there a Longshanks, actually?
I think he was playing Thunders in the 32 as well, because I think he had an Asami game or 2 that had spooked me. He ended up playing McCabe, though, which I think was a bit of a mistake. McCabe looks really good into Guild on paper, and then you realize Guild has a lot of good tools into McCabe, so that he's perhaps not as strong as he appears. Because a lot of people see the Precise, and they're like, oh, Precise, that lets me get around Leadline Coat, and they forget about all of the Stat 7, which lets you get around Cursed Objects, and Cursed Objects is a bit more important to be able to get around, I think. So I had played Perdita 2 into his McCabe, and the neat thing about that is Perdita 2 has an upgrade that just lets you flat out ignore Cursed Objects, so that you just put that on Frank, and then Frank is a menace. That was a good game, but ultimately was able to take that one out. And so after that, there was my game with... Who did I play right before I played?
QT Pierogi.
QT Pierogi, right. That was the Seamus game. So that was where I unveiled my Dashel to the MWS World for the first time.
You showed everyone your Dashel? An unannounced Dashel?
An unannounced Dashel.
You can go to jail for that, man. You can go to jail for that. You gotta be careful.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that was a really tough game, just because any game against Seamus is really matchup warping. But being able to stone on all of your minions if they're close enough by is a pretty helpful boon for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really tough, especially since we were playing on ballots, so Seamus can just jump anywhere he wants along the board and shoot things. But Nightcrawler Network's pretty cool. He had to kind of prioritize killing Nightcrawler Network over doing anything else that game, and it just took him long enough to do it. I was able to squeak out a win, and that earned me the privilege to play against Michael in the finals.
Ba-boom. All right. Michael, what's going on with you? Give us your rundown over there.
Yeah, by all means. I hopped into the top 32 picking my beloved Explorer Society, and my pool I thought was actually very challenging. I was against Hagen, who runs The Hidden Breach on YouTube. Check him out also. Really good.
He's a good pilot. He's a really good pilot. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And he was on Thunders this time. Big scary for us right now. Then I was against Nikitopola. He's also on Thunders. Very scared indeed. And then we had Quicket, who is a very solid Resurrectionist player.
Yep, I'm familiar with Quicket.
Yes.
He and I verbally joust on a regular basis in the Danger Planet Discord.
So
he's a really good pilot too. He's a good pilot.
He is. Really good pilot. Strong opinions and a strong player. And unfortunately for me, I drew these matchups in like the completely the wrong sequence. I ended up playing against Reses on Plant Explosives, where I was desperate to not play them because I think they're secretly really strong at it. And then Thunders I had to play against and raid the vaults. I'm like, okay, sure, I get the Asami treatment, I guess. So that was exciting. The first game was against Quicket, so we did get off to a good start. Luckily, I did manage to defeat him. I picked Anya. For similar reasons to what Landon mentioned, you might look at Reses and think, hey, McCabe's got some great tech here. I think Reses can dunk on McCabe. Like, they have a lot of ways to play around him. And I wanted to pick Anya because I think she's great at Plant Explosives. And the scheme pool was also very strong for her. He ended up picking Jackdaw because he thought I would pick McCabe, and Jackdaw has some excellent options against him, so kind of caught him off guard. He then thought that I would take Jin Baccarat, so didn't hire any Hanged. I didn't take Jin, so that also caught him off guard. And his plan just kind of quickly unraveled when he black jokered a duel on his rider, which was then stunned, and things unraveled quite rapidly there. So we kind of swept the floor with him, crushed him. Then I was against Hagen. As I mentioned, he did pick Asami just for me. This Raid the Vaults, which until recently I felt very comfortable with Maxine 2 on, so I picked her. I tried to emulate exactly what Landon suggested with big, stompy melee models which can ignore ignore hazardous. So we had the likes of Calypso in the crew, we had a Tidecaller, we had Bow, we had Hand of Janus, just heaps of options which can ignore the rift markers and can ignore the story of Suzaku bullshit and everything like that. And we were doing okay for some time, but the ability to pivot into a summon-oriented game plan made it really tough. Despite killing an unactivated Jaragomu turn 1, which I felt put me in a good spot, the raw value and attrition that crew puts out just eventually wore through me, and ended up losing by 4 points. So he did kind of dominate me, putting us into our final game against Thunders. I picked Maxine yet again. This is for Stuff the Ballots. I don't think that Maxine was necessarily the right pick here, actually, and it was revealed it was Shenlong. I had wanted to play Maxine 2 because she's my comfort pick, but Shenlong has so many good tools against Maxine 2 that I felt inclined to go Maxine 1. Super cagey game, incredibly difficult, and I basically bled out most of my crew just to eke enough points to just squeak a tie, a 6-6 tie, which, because I had, until that point, slightly more of a margin of victory than Nikitopola, I managed to squeak through into the round of 16.
Nice.
15th place, exactly, in fact.
Nice.
So, very poor showing as far as margin of victory.
Hey, man. I always say I come from a professional Magic the Gathering background. Like, that's my game before Malifaux. We always said, man, doesn't matter how you make the cut, you know? Once you make the cut, bro, just keep going. Doesn't matter how you make it, just make it. You know?
Whether it's by...
a hair or by a country mile, doesn't matter.
The quote, exactly right. Yeah, so we managed down only just owing to a tie, and then advanced to the single elim. I did not elect to change faction because I enjoy my explorers.
Because you're an honorable combatant, unlike our close personal friend Landon Pope the Pope-Darpa.
I am.
Any advantage you can get.
Hey, man.
My mother always told me cheat to win.
That's not reasonable, Pope. Anyway.
No, no, you have to cheat. It's Malifaux. You have to.
Yeah, sure. I guess you do have to cheat.
Yeah, you're going to lose the game if you don't cheat.
Yeah, if you don't.
It's in the rule book. Yeah. My first match in the single elim was against Esculax, who is one of the best explorers players I think in the world. I think he's from Denmark. I've previously met him in the online tournament scene 3 times and never beaten him. So I was kind of terrified. I knew he was on McCabe, and I ended up deciding Jedza was the pick to bring him down. I think Jedza has so many unique ways to attack the game that get around a lot of what McCabe is trying to do, that you can kind of play a game outside of just trying to match their stats. Things like Life of the Earth to just nuke their whole crew. I think I did 15 damage with that, with one action. For example, to just really neuter what he's trying to do, as well as forced movement and healing and stuff. So it was a really interesting game. This was on the same map which Landon mentioned, where he took out Asami, and so it was quite congested if you chose to play the map that way. His crew ended up just coming down the guts of it as best he could, and I kind of just weathered the onslaught from McCabe for a few turns, outvalued him, and dominated the strat. So we managed to get through that one. In round of 8, I was playing against a fellow New Zealander here, Maniacal Cackle, and he's been enjoying his Lucius too.
Another very good, well-known player.
Yes, indeed. He's a absolutely tenacious and scary opponent. He had been keeping all his games secret up to this stage, as well as his 7-2 clubbing of Will, who I would consider is New Zealand's best player. So he absolutely dominated him in the round of 16, so I was a bit scared. I knew it was going to be Lucius. I picked Anya because I feel Anya has a lot of great answers into guild. And again, McCabe is not that great.
For the viewers at home that are uninitiated, quick overview, what are those tools into guild?
She's super flexible, and you can choose where you want to fight. I think if you're playing a static keyword and you have to just go like fisticuffs with guild, you can come unstuck pretty rapidly. But perhaps most importantly, guild hates stunned, maybe more than any other faction, it feels like. A lot of really good guild players kind of one-trick pony Pale Rider to success. You can stop that by stunning it, and then more importantly, you have hostile work environment, which means they cannot remove the stunned from their beloved rider, which makes their plan not a very good one if they just run it down the guts.
And you can pick where you want to fight. You don't have to engage them where they want to be engaged. You can bounce around like a little pinball if you want.
Exactly. You also have other cute tech that can help you out-tempo and out-sequence the type of game plan Guild wants to bring. You have something like Jin Bakara, for example, where you're going to get that extra pass token. Whether that's worth 8 stones or not is not always yes, but sometimes it is, and then that'll help you to pick and choose the fights on your terms. So we managed to hold up basically his entire crew with just a botanist and Irina, while Anya and the rest of my crew concentrated in the middle, got my scoring going, removed 1 or 2 models. A feature of most of my Anya games is I only end up killing a couple of models, and usually my whole crew is dead by the end of it also. But the scoreline was very flattering with like a 7-3, I think, so I just kind of crushed him in terms of actually scoring. So that worked quite favorably. We then found ourselves against Andre, who, as we know, is quite a menace. He was secretly hoping I would beat Maniacal Cackle because he feared Maniacal Cackle much more than he feared me. Not sure if that was...
Mistake!
Unsure if that was some hubris or something, but he ended up picking his Perdita, which he's been soloing for the longest of times. And this was on Stuff the Balance Corner, which definitely helped me. We picked our Anya yet again because we felt that she's a good answer, and she's my premier pick for Stuff the Balance also. And we managed to engineer a situation where we just stopped him scoring anything in the first few turns, which meant that even though he started wiping out my crew towards the latter half of the game and scoring multiple points a turn. He couldn't catch my scoreline, and so that game was decided 6-5. I didn't have much left on the actual board, but I had enough and had scored enough earlier on that the superior combat prowess of family wasn't enough to like carry him through 4 or 5 turns.
How did you deal with everybody's favorite Frankenstein, Mr.
Francisco?
Yeah.
So it's a really good question. I think if you see family, you have to know how you're going to handle him. You cannot just show up and play your game plan.
No, he'll fucking wreck you.
He will wreck you. He absolutely will. So importantly in this game, he picked Perdita 1, so there's no duck and cover. So auras do affect him. So things like Celebrity, when Winston interacts, will give him a distracted. That goes a small way to helping out. You can slow him. That helps a bit also. So there's those kinds of things that we're trying to do. But the main thing I decided is I'm just going to speed bump him. Like, I know he will kill anything he wishes, but if I feed him the right models at the right time, he can only kill them so quickly.
My main model, a 4-course meal of your own models.
I gave him my own models armed with flush with cash, and then that enables you to live a little longer.
Yep.
Specifically on Winston, really good with Luck Thief. So when he starts chewing on Winston, at any stage I can say, cool, that misses and I'll heal 2. It's very expensive. It's like a 4 Soulstone exchange when that happens, because you've had to spend 2, you lose 1 and they gain 1. But if that's what is required to curb his tempo, then that's what you're going to have to do. So we made that decision point. I would say one of the critical moments in this game, I know we've mentioned Black Jokers are, not the reason someone will lose, but he was hitting Sovereign with Frank and was almost definitely going to kill Sovereign. And I cheated down on my duel total to give him a pos flip on the damage, and that second card was the Black Joker, so he didn't end up killing Sovereign. And that was pretty critical, because then he had to solve how he's actually going to deal with Sovereign, which just gave me more activation space to keep extending my scoreboard. The end of the game, Frank was on full health. I barely touched him the whole game. He had a few models left to score with, but I chewed through the rest, and when he extended Perdita and I killed her quite early on, it meant Frank had to do all the heavy lifting, and he just didn't have enough AP to do everything. So that's how I chose to solve the Frank conundrum.
Nice. Yeah, that's good context. I always my big thing, we literally last night just shot the Perdita tier list and video with Pope and Andre. Literally last night. So it's funny to hear this story from you here, having literally last night just been talking to Andre for 3 hours about Perdita and having him and Pope argue about it. It was hilarious.
They could probably offer so much more than I could on family as a whole. The only real thing I would say is that the Catalan rifleman I brought also does a great job against Guild, being able to reach out and give stunned, and in this game stun the rider and then kill the rider in a subsequent turn. So Catalan rifleman is my hero.
Cool. So now we know how you both got to the finals. I guess, curious from you guys, was there any prep on either of your guys' side? What was the thought process from either of you going into the game? Did you make any skew or hiring decisions or specific lists because of the opponent or because of the huge stakes that you were at? Were you called for sponsorships from Pepsi Cola and Frito-Lay's and all of these TV endorsements? How did you deal with the fame? I guess more of those are the questions that come to mind for me. For you guys as the 2 final participants in the finals. Whoever wants to lead with that, I guess.
Yeah, I can start. So the prep that I did pretty much for every game that I played is I went to my, brain trust of trusty American players that I respect the opinions of. And I went, how are you guys feeling? And Andre's on this list, especially he was the one I went to first since he had just played into Michael and lost. So the second that happened, I went, all right, well, what happened in your game? And I think he was a little still tilted off of the result. He kind of just said, I flipped bad, and that wasn't very good advice.
And that wasn't
not
good
quite what I was hoping
helpful.
for. So I decided then to reach out to, a couple other people and kind of brainchild, well, I'm pretty sure he'll probably just play Anya again because he just did it into Guild and won. And I'm also Guild, so, he'd done into Guild, 2 games in a row at this point in time? So you had a lot of practice into Guild. And I got to say, my experience into Explorers has not been fully fleshed out. We don't really see as many of them in the States, I think, as, you apparently have over in New Zealand.
Nathan is that very high level.
Yeah, and Nathan plays
and Sam
2 very,
sometimes.
very specific masters. I don't think I've seen him ever not on Jedza or Nexus. So
yeah, and like literally no one else plays Nexus other than him.
So it was very much a position of inexperience that I was going into through this matchup. I farmed around a bit for some ideas as far as things that I knew I was going to need. Like, I knew I was going to need some anti-armor to try and kill the bird. I knew I was going to want some model to draw cards in case he played Anya too, so I didn't just walk into a couple executes. And, ultimately I ended up on the list that I was on. But as far as prep, that was kind of as much as I had done. It was only until I was interviewing with Drayson that I even kind of looked really at how I was going to deploy and unpack my crew. And then about a week later when we actually played, I forgot my plan for advancing up the map. So that wasn't a good look. But, that's kind of how I approach the whole thing is, I like to think a lot about Malifaux so that I don't have to play as much to, do well.
Sure, fair enough. Michael, what do you got? How did you prep for the finals? What's going on with you, knowing that you snuck in and then you went through a killing field of very high-level opponents, and now you're at the finals. What do you got going on?
Yeah, it got to the finals having come through as 15th seed, so every game I had to win and I could never tie, and that would be the same in the finals. If we had a tie, Landon would take it out. I was also the defender, so I was going to just have to accept whatever deployment I got. When Landon gave me the top deployment on the map we were playing, I did a little bit of looking around as to what cover there is. We're against Guild, and Guild has a lot of keywords with good guns. Even when that's not their primary focus, they often still have good guns. And most of those guns ignore concealing or friendly fire, but not a lot of them ignore cover. So I'm like, where is the cover? Show me the cover, please. Which kind of made me reminisce of how I was playing 40k back in the day looking for cover. I found lots of boxes and decided that would be how I anchor my game plan. I still think Anya is a good pick into Guild. This pool is pretty good for Anya. It's not excellent, but it's up there, so I thought let's pick her again. And then I saw Dashel, which was very interesting. I know Landon had just played Dashel in the semis, so it was a bit of recency bias as well as being really good in the pool also. I really think it's such an interesting dynamic between Guard and Syndicate in this very scheme marker heavy scheme pool where there's 3 scheme marker schemes. So it's just fascinating because we both have mechanisms to remove enemy scheme markers and just add a lot of scheme markers of our own. And so then I decided to build to try and handle Dashel, who I have not had a lot of experience against. Brendan Gubbins, he plays a little bit of Dashel here and there for a bit of fun, but it's not really his main calling in life. And so the lists that he had sort of suggested, and he suggested very many of them, none of them were quite exactly what Landon ended up picking. Whereas in the previous round, it was quite interesting. He literally picked Andre's crew model for model, soulstone by soulstone, with the only thing being the pivot point of which Perdita it would be. And he thought it's probably Perdita 2, but I should worry about Perdita 1. Andre picked Perdita 1. I didn't really know what was happening with Guard, except that Nightcrawler Network is coming, and it must be solved. You have to have a solve for it, or you just kind of lose the game, because that model is cracked. So we had to have a solution for it.
Fair enough. So then I guess I always envisioned this as a group conversation. The both of you have like a dynamic conversation about the blows that you traded in game, and then one of you came out on top. I don't. But if you guys want to just talk about the game too, that's chill. Like, how did the game go?
Sure.
I want to know where your points came from specifically.
Yeah, what was going on with it?
My first question I just have for Michael, because this was such an important game for me. I actually went back and watched the replay of it. I don't usually do that, but I was curious if you've watched the replay on our game yet, Michael, or if that's something you intended to do.
Definitely. These high-level games, I've watched as many of them as I can, because I can learn a lot from others, but I can also learn when I see my own decision making and how I handled things retrospectively. So the answer is yes, twice.
Yeah, I'd say for me personally, my kind of understanding of how the game went, the first time I played the game, and, I had these really frustrating moments that, in retrospect, Doug's saying exactly what I kind of was probably trying to get by watching the replay to begin with, where I black jokered some important flips, I feel like, and it was just coming off the game immediately on my loss of it was a score of 4-2, I want to say. Felt like 4-3, but that was because, it was actually 4-2. But it felt like, man, if I just made one or two of those black joker flips, maybe I would have, had the game or whatever. And so I was feeling really bummed, and I just wanted to go back and, watch to see what the hell happened. And so it kind of starts off with some misunpacking on my part, where I'm forgetting the 3-inch move on my DCU bonus because it's the first time I've ever played the model anywhere, ever.
Obviously, you take it to the MWS finals match then.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I'm pretty want to do that.
Pope.
If it's the right model or the right master or the right whatever, I'll play it for the first time. I had never played Sonya before when I clocked Drayson with it, and it was a good idea. So in this particular instance, I end up missing 3 inches on my unpack, and then kind of do a weird thing with Melissa Core and my mounted guard on my ride with me that kind of puts me back on tempo for the whole game because I'm always missing 1 or 2 AP with those models. And I just never really figure out what to do with my mounted guard because I send it in a weird direction because I don't want it to go closer to his model that ignores its demise. So I don't send it up that flank to score points kind of like I want it to. And it's just on the wrong half of the map to do the points on the other half of the map that really should have probably been going to from its very first ride with me. On top of that, I want to say I very embarrassingly make a rules mistake on the first turn, which leads to me making a bad cheat. I don't realize I need a ski marker for the extra 1 damage ping from Slander, and so I drop a Severe out of my hand that I don't need or want to cheat. After we realize that it doesn't kill the rifleman, it's a bit of too late for me to just say, oops, I thought I could cheat, I should get my card back. That didn't seem like it was proper etiquette, but it was most certainly a mistake to have cheated that card without it actually securing a kill on the rifleman, who then lives for the rest of the game. Because that card was very important for just being a Severe I could have used later on for any of the damage flips. I just needed to hit Severe on my straights that I just didn't have the card for. Other than that, I get Dashel in the middle of his crew eventually sometime on turn 2 and hold him to that area of the board to kind of stop him from scoring points. I'll be curious as to, Michael's perspective on how that Dashel dive worked out, because it wasn't as valuable as it could have been, but I still feel like it got the job done by just sitting there and preoccupying a lot of his crew. He hits an unfortunate red Joker damage flip on Dashel, which means instead of living for the whole game, he dies sometime in turn 3, which really is not optimal, but it happens. You're not expecting Dashel to live 5 turns. He lives however long he lives, and hard to wound Jokers happen. So and then eventually it just gets down to the point where he hasn't really scored any schemes, but I haven't really scored any points. And I know I can pick up 3 points on the last turn if I try really, really hard. But I do some mistakes in cheats and mistakes in activation orders and lose my Melissa Core unactivated on the last turn. Don't really make the right calls with a couple of AP, but at this point in time, for context, all MWS games are timed. And we're running really close on time because it's the very end of the most important game of the year. And so we had all taken a decent amount of time to not fuck up any earlier than that, right? So there's a bit of time pressure that causes those mistakes on my end, I think. And then ultimately, instead of getting that 4-4 tie or that 4-3, I end up dropping down to 4-2 on the margin. But those are from a very high level, the high points of the game to me, other than I guess I've glossed over the fact that early in turn 3, I want to say, or not early in turn 3, but on turn 3, I try and clean up the rifleman that I didn't. It's actually really late in turn 3 now that I think about it, because I was trying to clean up the rifleman that I didn't kill earlier, who's on 1 wound now. and I reshuffle through the deck and flip that black fresh off the top, which stung all the more because I had started that turn with a black fresh off the top from Dashel. So it's like, I want to kill someone, you know.
Aww.
But those I think are the important inflection points for me.
What do you got, Mr. Mike?
Yeah, it's quite interesting hearing it from the other side of the table. That black tracker was awful. I remember commenting on it live in the game, like, you're kidding me. Fresh deck, 53-ish cards to look at, and yeah, there's 3 cards we're pulling, but still, that's awful luck. My turn 1 was super mild. I think Sovereign did nothing except ferry Anya forward, and Anya did nothing except kill a single camera bot and then walk. That's not really good master AP, but I chose to do that willingly to get a bit of activation control, and then to try have her central. It was always my game plan that she takes the hits on her face and then gets healed rather than anyone else. A lot of the other models are just like walk focusing and just prepping for turn 2. The whole game, most of my decision making was how can I just deny strat and stay on top of the strat. That Rifleman Black Joker damage against him was super fortuitous for me. In the following turn, I managed to kill the Nightcrawler network before it activated, which enabled me to basically ignore the summoned camera bot for the rest of the game, and that Rifleman ended up scoring me 2 points directly on the strat, as well as helping drop ski markers for my eventual information overload, which I eventually did get a reveal point for. So that Rifleman was MVP in many ways, just managing to not quite die, which was great.
Now, I just want to pause there and ask, did you actually mean for him to be a botanist? Because you had messaged beforehand, like, oops, I forgot, I accidentally put in a Rifleman here, he was supposed to be a botanist.
Yes, he was 100% meant to be a botanist. Funnily enough,
I just thought that was funny since he's your MVP.
In this game, the botanist could have, and probably would have, done exactly the same thing, just like walk, interact, walk kind of thing, with just different bonuses. One has a TN, one just discards a card. But I do like the Rifleman, and I said at the time, if ever there was going to be a model that I accidentally picked the wrong model for, this as a like-for-like replacement is probably the best I could hope for. And the Rifleman can still emulate what a botanist is trying to do really well. And turns out hard to kill is pretty good. So it ended up somewhat working out okay, I suppose.
I mean, you won the game, so I would say it worked out fine.
Exactly, and he did directly contribute to a lot of the points I scored. Winston underperformed quite poorly, I would say. I made some decisions around how I might try to sequence his activations around Dashel's activations. I had Ensnare, which I was trying to score off Dashel, but with Trail of Gore nearby with his Executioner and with Break Protocol, if you don't time it just perfectly, you'll just give him a free summon or like at least a free action. So Winston was pretty poor for me this game, I would say. I did manage to see enough turns with my big heavy armored construct models that they got the value I was requiring from them. So I also hired Hand of Janus, and Sovereign only ended up dying on turn 3, I believe it was. So I got enough value from them before they were cut down that I sort of held the brawl. Landon had pinned me in the middle with a lot of my soul stones, but my crew was stuck there, healing my own models and trying to keep handing out stunned and slow and distracted to his. But I did have sufficient scheming power outside of that, and most especially I managed to get Anya free, flicker up the table that then she could go and kill the Nightcrawler network on turn 3, I think it was. I think you failed to kill the Rifleman on turn 2, because he was going to score for me then. And if you had killed him, I would have to have made another plan to score the strat. So on turn 3, you killed one of my. I think you killed Sovereign on turn 3 before it activated, and then in response, I killed the Nightcrawler before it activated. And at the time, I was like, it really hurts to let Sovereign go here, but I can win a game in which Sovereign dies, and I cannot win a game where Nightcrawler doesn't die. So I was like, I'll make this trade. Sure, let's just kill the Nightcrawler network. Which is not easy, but I managed to get there. The stat 7 on the Tomahawk really goes a long way to help. And then I kind of had a brain fart moment and sent Anya back into the middle, which just handed Sweating Bullets, which I knew that Landon had and was about 95% sure it was on the Executioner, but it's a really tough game, and like you're not considering every last possibility all the time. So I did kind of gotcha myself with that one, but it ended up being okay in the sense that I had managed to neuter Landon's scoring of a strat, and like you mentioned earlier, with the mounted guard sort of hesitating as to which direction it wants to go, the only strat it was picking up was on turn 5 to score a point. Or a potential point.
Would have if I had not mispositioned it.
Yes, so he picked up, and again, this leads to we're running out of time rapidly, so Landon's last few activations were like, get the strat, move the executioner. I know that Michael's taken info overload, so I'm going to Trail of Gore to get rid of a scheme, playstyle my own scheme, like all is well, potentially score the deathbeds that I've taken. But as it so happened, Irina had enough movement with her ambush, walk, charge to engage both models and have a swing at the mounted guard. Price of Progress lets me bake in the anti-demise trigger, and I happen to top deck it anyway, or have it in hand anyway, and then I just hit a lucky moderate damage to just remove it, which took away his ability to score strat on turn 5.
Which wouldn't have even been a problem had Hand of Janus not triple severed on a double negative earlier in the game to blast 4 onto him, but that's just another residual salt.
Yes. Seeking Vaults is it's good for the tilt factor, that's for sure.
So,
that
where did the game? What was the final score then of the match?
4-2.
4-2.
4-2. I had scored my reveal and my endpoint on Sweating Bullets, lost my strat point at the end of the game for my mounted guard, and failed to get it every other turn of the game. I think the only other turn of the game that I could have gotten it was when I was flipping to kill Hand of Janus turn 4. If I had executed him on the first attack instead of the second, I would have been able to interact for the strat point then. But I was top decking for the Crow because I didn't have one in hand, so it was very much just a shit show as to whether it would happen or not.
Yeah, I remember that. I think the other option you had would be to just scatter him away, which kind of sucks because then he lives to turn 5. But if you did scatter him away, then I think you were in position to potentially get a point there, because I think that was right at the death of turn 4, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you had another activation somewhere in there where
right.
you could have done something had I decided to go the route where I scattered you, and then, I'm in a really bad spot if Hand of Janus is alive turn 5 and I didn't get as much as I needed out of the strat point. But yeah, for sure.
So I think the biggest last question that I have, and this is for both of you, I'd be curious to see what both of you say, because I'm sure the answer will be different. But you both did very well. You made it to the finals. You did the 2 best out of this championship season of everybody. Can you give us the top 3 things that you learned from the beginning of the process, MWS Championships, to the end of the final, that you're going to basically take away with you and carry into 2025? If there is 3, if there isn't 3, and there's none, just that's fine. You can tell me, hell no, Doug, I didn't learn anything. But I'm assuming you guys learned a little bit during this process, and I'd love to just kind of get, if you have any wisdom nuggets that you're carrying with you, that I think the viewers at home would also probably think that would be really cool to hear from you guys as well.
Yeah, I've definitely got a few. But as a gentleman, I shall let Landon go first.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think I learned that just hiring the Nightcrawler network is not enough to win games. You have to... In every game that I played him, I don't think he actually scored a single point. He might have scored me 1 point in the game with QT Pierogi, but I'm not actually certain that's true. What he does is he annoys the hell out of your opponent to the point where he has to commit to go kill him, but so long as your opponent's doing that, it's actually pretty difficult for him to, score points. So make your game plan around that rather than the assumption that he's just going to solve the strategy for you. Other than that, the cross-meta sort of function of the MWS really was on full display in the finals, I want to say, because as you said, Michael, you hadn't really seen much Dashel, and I hadn't really seen much Anya. And so, we got to play an entirely new and interesting matchup to explore for our finals game. And that was a really cool thing that happened. So takeaway number 2 is Anya is not the joke that the American meta thinks she is. And then what would I say takeaway number 3 would be? I'm gonna pass on that one for now. Maybe I'll come up with one after I hear Michael's.
Sure.
So glad to hear that I'm resurrecting Anya one game at a time. I think she's superb, just quietly, in this GG. My main learning that I've taken from Top 32, which I've actually written down in our little Pack Mentality Discord. We have a little corner of the Discord where we have our own little goals and, I guess, as we improve as players, making notes if we want. And I've written down there to play the long game, that you don't need to rush to score schemes early. Early in this GG, I felt the opposite, and I was always trying to score 3 points on turn 2 every game. If I could do that, that's what I'm doing. I had it stuck in my head that you must score as many points early for scoreboard pressure reasons, to get ahead and get that mental edge, and also so that later on in the game you can focus more on just brawling and out-positioning rather than having to score those schemes early on. And I've started coming around to the idea that you can look at the game in reverse, actually. You've got 5 turns to play the game. You can't score any points on turn 1, obviously. On turns 4 and 5, you can score 6 of your 8 available points. So, 3/4 of all the points you can score, you can do right at the death of the game, as long as you position yourself correctly in the first couple of turns. You don't actually have to sprint to score. It can be a marathon. So play a bit slower, take your time, use your time, and just make sure you get the strat. If you can deny your opponent a strat point, the pressure is massively on them to catch up, whereas if you deny them a scheme, they can just score it on any of 3 following turns. So that might sound kind of elementary, just deny the strat, lol. But really, if you can focus your efforts on ensuring you will always score strat, and you've got ways to impede their ability to score strat, that's the number one thing you can do to give yourself a chance to win in the tail end, because they've got too much catching up to do, which is exactly how I beat Andre, and I would say probably also how I beat Landon, because he out-schemed me this game. I only got 1 point and he got 2 on the schemes. But getting to the situation where I just had an overwhelming strat advantage meant it was not something he could overcome. Now that I think about it, I think it was the same also against Esculax in the round of 16, where we kind of traded even on the schemes, but he never scored strat and I scored 4 points on it, so I just won by default. So that's the main thing. And then the other thing is, if you are playing something which you feel in your heart is good and it's performing well for you, it could just be because that suits your playstyle or your meta, and that's completely fine, and you should stick to your guns. I think it's very easy to look at the net lists and what people say are good models in a vacuum and work for other people and don't necessarily work for you, and then be dissuaded away from models you trust. In every round here in the top 32, I picked a weird model which most people would not normally consider, and they basically all rewarded me for having picked them, whether that's something like Hannah Janus when we know armor's coming already, or Irina, which no one else seems to be tremendously hot on and I think is amazing, or hiring things like Model 9 randomly in Maxine Cruz. They did really well for me, and I think that's because I trusted these random weird models more so than the obvious picks, because they've delivered results for me. So your own experiences are what you should look to first and foremost before you look at internet wisdom. What works for you, keep doing that.
I also think there's a point to be made where, because you talked about this in your Quicket match, where basically he thought you were going to weave, and instead you bobbed, and he just ran into a fucking brick wall and died. And so, in the Magic card community, when I would go and I would approach championship level events, I would intentionally put sometimes obscure cards in my sideboard that were not known to the meta, because I knew at the highest level of competition that my opponents would be anticipating certain components out of my mono red aggro deck or my mono green Tron deck, and they'd expect those cards. So when I played something that might be, let's call it lovingly less trodden as a game component with my deck, right? It could take really experienced pilots completely by surprise. And I found that sometimes that was a way that I would have an edge at some of these higher level events. And it became a thing that I got really good at in the Magic card world. I'm not good enough to do it in the Malifaux world currently against players like you or Pope. right? Like that's what I'm working towards. But like hearing you say that warms my heart, because I am like standing there being like, hell yeah, like let's go. Take something that's a little weird, throw someone off, maybe they haven't seen it before, and then all of a sudden they're expecting A and you show up with B, and it is a leverage point of advantage for you. Would you think that's a fair point?
I think that's a really beautiful analogy and makes so much sense. I'm probably not as competitive in Magic as you, but I do understand the concept, especially in the sideboard. I could see that making a lot of sense, and that is how this played out. Like in my round of 16, I played Jedza without the Kurgan and Gravegoo, which is like heresy. If you've ever spoken to anyone who plays Jedza, they're like, what are you doing? But I saw more value in Casey Jones, so I brought him, and he did amazing things for me. So like when you've latched onto things that are slightly off meta, I mean, maybe you could argue Anya herself is completely off meta just in general, so already people are scratching their heads. But if it's seeing you success and people don't quite know how to handle it, keep doing it. Like keep forcing them to find a solution.
Yeah, I agree.
Because then the pressure's all on them to answer this weird question you're posing with your supposedly weird models that you're showing up with.
I 100% agree with that. It warms my heart to hear you say it, honestly.
Yeah, to dogpile on that point, I guess. So, obviously, Malifaux is this game where everything's super, super complex, and everybody, you like, once you get into the reps, you like sort of know where you're going. So making your opponent have to read cards is the best for sure, and it brings me no small amount of joy. But I guess question to both of you, what is the, like, according to internet wisdom, worst model that you either hired or saw in all of your games in this event? Like the model that people like don't like, maybe you hired it, maybe somebody else did, that people are like, that guy's bad, don't play him, and you did anyway and it worked out.
You can go first, Lenny.
I was a filthy meta chaser. I don't know. I think...
No, I know that. Well, that's why I said that you saw Landon, because I know.
Oh, that I saw.
Yeah, or that your opponent.
I don't think I played anything that was all too weird. Now that you know what, the model I played that was probably weird was Alan Reed in my game with McCabe, but he also just got freshly buffed, so I don't know that you can call him all that weird. Nino was the shittiest model I played, and he was awful. There we go.
Nino. Yeah, check out our Predator tier list to see how bad Nino is. I think we put him at the very top of sometimes higher.
Almost auto.
And that was far too generous.
Landon famously hates Nino. We did it.
Hilarious.
Michael,
what about
any takes?
Any takes on
maybe outside of the one-off Catalan rifleman that was secretly
the Catalan rifleman that was never supposed to be, but was the Catalan rifleman that could and did win the world championships? Hey.
Yes, in the semis and the finals, that Catalan rifleman pulled his weight, even if I only meant to hire him once. Is it really rude to say people shouldn't hire Pale Rider against Anya? Not sure. That's a terrible hire.
So it makes sense to me.
Exactly, right. Because you're a skilled opponent. Let me think. So I don't want to discredit people's lists because people play what they want to play. I know that in round of 16, Escalax brought Mr. Natara and Tannenbaum together with the McCabe crew, which is really weird and interesting. I don't think that they're bad models. I just don't quite click as to what exactly they're doing in a McCabe crew on Raid the Vaults. Like, if Michael ever gets into melee with Mr. Natara, he just ceases to function as a model. Like, he can't obey anyone, he can't obey Michael. And I've got so much healing that, yeah, you can switch up my stones, I just don't care. So that was weird. I feel like I know that Esculac has seen a lot of success with Tannenbaum, so like I'll wear that's cool. But Mr. Natara did strike me as just a strange pick. There's so many good models McCabe can lean on. That one just...
I have to imagine it was so that you could obey stuff out of your Jedza bubble if you were playing Jedza 1.
You would think so, right? And maybe that's what it was initially positioned as, but then he just sort of sent McCabe off into the middle, and then Mr. Natara sort of like wandered around to one flank and tried to say hello to Michael and kind of struggled. So I don't know, maybe it was just a deployment issue. I can see the obey being valuable for that, but then I'm wondering, surely any number of lures or pushes are like at least as effective and don't require 9 stones worth of hungry card model. But I would also
makes your bonus TNs a bit more generous, and then I don't know if people do this anymore. Do you hire Curator?
He does.
Because if you don't hire Curator, he's a way of getting a second scrap out of Luna. So
Yes.
there's a couple of cute things he does for McCabe in particular.
There are some
also,
cute things.
if you do hire a curator, you have some cute poison things that you can do with this show as well.
Yes, which is something I have experimented with in the past in a McCabe crew. But that is like a 23 stone package, those 3 models, which is a lot of stones that are not directly helping, quote unquote. I would all preface this by saying I've never really been a Mr. Natura believer. I've just struggled to ever get value out of him, but that's probably because I'm just not good with obeys, whether that's using or receiving them. So maybe I'm colored by that experience. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. I guess, the last question I have is just more of a curiosity. What is the pack mentality got planned for 2025? What are you guys up to? You got anything going on that you're looking at doing for the part of next year or anything like that?
Yeah, we want to do some more collaboration work. We want to try a few new formats as well as sticking to our existing format, which is often talking about high-level games we've played. And we also have some hopeful ambitions to do a little bit of traveling to events to play a bit more in person also, whether that's across the ditch to Australia or down to Christchurch here in New Zealand, or if the economy picks up, maybe we could travel over to either Europe or the US for like an event or two. Those are certainly within our would be nice bracket. So we're doing that. But outside of that, we also would like to maybe getting into a bit of streaming for Vassal. We think that would be a pretty cool thing to be extending our niche into slightly, and that could open up opportunities to collaborate as well with others, such as yourselves, for instance, or any number of wonderful people. We're happy to work with anyone.
And if folks want to find you, where are the best places to find Pack Mentality?
Yeah, if you want to listen to us talk drivel, then we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and such. Just find Pack Mentality. But if you'd like to come ahead into our Discord, literally search Pack Mentality with our logo on it. All people are welcome to join us. We have some open invites available to that, and it's primarily structured around competitive players we've mentioned before.
Cool. And then MWS is the best place for the MWS, the Discord mostly. It's kind of the hub for everything.
It is. It's literally called the Malifaux World Series Hub. So hop on in there. As Landon mentioned, even if you're a lurker who just wants to, by the power of osmosis, learn new things, that's perfectly fine. And maybe you'll choose to play a game with us, hopefully, in the not so distant future also.
Very cool. Landon, you got anything before we head off for the end of the episode?
Looking forward to seeing all of y'all at Captain Con, assuming this releases before then. Otherwise, hope I see all you in the MWS in the coming year. That's all I really got, though.
And
Goodbye,
stay
Internet.
tuned for the new game that you're officially the core designer of, that will be releasing in Q1 of 2025, right, Landon?
If that's what you want to dedicate to.
Landon and I and a lot of other people as well are working on a game. The publication date goal for it is the tail end of Q1 2025. It's kind of going to be a strategic tabletop game, and we will have more news as it goes on. So, gentlemen, one last thing to do. We have to say goodbye to the internet or it'll get angry at us. So, I guess, gentlemen, Michael, say goodbye to the internet.
You can't just tease me with a new game like that and give me no tantalizing details. Oh my word. Okay. Keep me posted for beta testing because I'm down for that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're starting closed beta testing in January. I'll have Landon, either myself or Landon, will send you the rules and the details on it if you want to be a part of it.
Please, and thank you. And thanks so much for having me on. And I hope everyone has a happy festive season and happy holidays. Cheers all.
Yeah. Happy holidays, the internet. Landon, say goodbye.
Good night, Internet. Hope you look forward to my new game.
And I'm Brandon.
Goodbye.
Hey, everyone. thanks for stopping by the planet. You can check out the video description below for all of our important info and links. You can see a link to the Discord if you want to come be nerds on the internet with us. We have channels for like all the games that we're playing and all of our community members are excited about. You can also check out all of our affiliate links for like our Redbubble merch store, our Pro Acryl discount code because they make the best hobby supplies on our planet and yours, and of course our Wyrd affiliate link if you're buying Malifaux stuff straight from Jonathan Q. Wyrd himself. Most importantly, though, you can see a link to our Patreon where I post things from time to time, like behind the scenes cuts or early vids, and we even have a tier where I'll bake you cookies and send them to you in real life. Thanks a ton to our current patrons who cover the cost of all of our software to make these videos, and we couldn't do it without them. You can see their names appearing now across the screen, and until next time, goodbye the internet. We did it!